What if one commander could turn the tide of war not through caution, but through sheer momentum? What if victory depended on a leader who believed that speed itself was a weapon, a force capable of overwhelming any obstacle in its path? This is the story of a figure whose presence on the battlefield changed everything around him, a man who expected motion, demanded precision, and pursued objectives with a relentless energy that unsettled enemies and stunned allies. His name was George S. Patton, the U.S. tank commander, whose reputation grew not from hesitation, but from decisive, determined action. Tonight, we step into the world shaped by his command, engines humming in cold pre-dawn air, armored columns forming lines like steel rivers, and fields where timing meant survival. Missing any moment of this story means losing the thread that explains how one battlefield leader could influence an entire campaign. Welcome everyone, I'm Knightley, and this is our documentary journey into Patton, the U.S. tank commander. Stay close, because what comes next will reveal the forces that shaped one of World War II's most assertive military minds. By the early years of World War II, the global landscape was defined by rapid advances and collapsing fronts. Nations across Europe faced an enemy whose strategy combined speed, coordination, and decisive movement. Germany's mechanized forces had demonstrated a style of warfare that shocked the world and reshaped every calculation Allied commanders had previously relied on. The fall of France signaled a profound shift in perception. If entire nations could be overrun in weeks, then the traditional pace of warfare no longer applied. The United States, still preparing for broader involvement, had to re-examine how it intended to engage when the time came. Among the voices calling for readiness was a man who understood mobility better than most, George S. Patton. Even before American troops entered full-scale combat, planners recognized that future victories would depend on controlling movement. The war had become a contest of industrial strength, rapid deployment, and the ability to sustain momentum across continents. The U.S. Army rapidly expanded, training new divisions, developing armor doctrines, and adapting lessons learned from both Allied and Axis operations. In this evolving environment, Patton emerged as a specialist in armored warfare, someone who had studied its potential long before it became a global necessity. As the war intensified, his skills placed him in positions where results mattered immediately. Germany's advances in 1939–1941 transformed the map. Poland fell, Norway and Denmark followed, France collapsed. Across Europe, mechanized columns demonstrated the power of integrated armor, infantry, and air support. The Allies needed a response that not only matched, but countered this new style of warfare. For the United States, entering the conflict meant confronting an adversary that had mastered coordination at high speed. American forces would need commanders who understood that armor was not simply a tool, it was the centerpiece of a modern campaign. Patton, who had long studied mobility, recognized these realities early, shaping his approach to leadership. By 1942, the fight in North Africa had become the focus of Allied strategy. The region offered a proving ground for new commanders, new technologies, and evolving tactics. The desert terrain demanded adaptability and clear strategic vision. Every decision affected not only local outcomes, but also European plans still developing for future operations. Patton entered North Africa at a critical moment, tasked with restoring order, improving discipline, and preparing American troops for engagements against experienced Axis units. The stakes were high. Success would open the Mediterranean. Failure would prolong the conflict and strengthen enemy positions. For Germany and Italy, North Africa represented more than a distant front. It was a strategic shield protecting southern Europe and a gateway to Middle Eastern resources. Axis leadership believed that control of the region would hinder Allied plans and divert resources away from Europe. They relied on experienced field commanders and well-organized armored units. In this environment, any Allied misstep could have significant consequences. Patton had to learn quickly, adjusting tactics and pushing his forces to match enemies who had gained years of combat experience before America entered the war. While North Africa heated up, conflicts extended across multiple continents. The Soviet Union struggled against enormous pressure on the Eastern Front, diverting German attention but not weakening their resolve elsewhere. Meanwhile, the Pacific saw intense fighting between the United States and Japan, further stretching American logistical capabilities. Within this complex network of global operations, every theater influenced the others. Commanders like Patton had to consider not only local objectives, but also how their actions fit into a broader world conflict. Victory required coordination on unprecedented levels. As American forces became more involved, Patton's leadership style gained attention. He emphasized readiness, discipline, and decisive movement. His training methods were strict, but they produced results. Troops under his command learned to operate with speed, clarity, and efficiency, qualities necessary for the fast-moving campaigns that lay ahead. The U.S. Army needed leaders capable of integrating armor, infantry, and air support, and Patton fit this profile. His rise suggested that American strategy would increasingly rely on commanders willing to act with energy and precision. By mid-war, the Allies faced a strategic challenge. They needed to regain the initiative. While industrial production in the United States grew rapidly, converting that strength into battlefield results required experienced leadership. North Africa offered an opportunity to test, refine, and eventually project Allied power into Europe itself. Momentum became a critical asset. Every victory meant new positions, new resources, and new opportunities. Every setback prolonged the conflict. Patton's arrival signaled a shift in Allied intentions, a commitment to engage with speed and assertiveness rather than caution. No campaign could succeed without effective support. The vast distances of North Africa, combined with desert climate and limited infrastructure, forced commanders to balance ambition with practicality. Supply networks, vehicle maintenance, and fuel reserves became as important as battlefield tactics. Patton understood this well. He pushed his officers to monitor every truck, every tank, every shipment. In his view, mobility was not simply a tactical advantage, it was a strategic necessity. Forces that could not move were forces that could not win. This mindset prepared his divisions for the operations to follow. The outcomes in North Africa shaped plans for Italy and ultimately Western Europe. The Allies saw the African campaign as the first step in a larger strategy aimed at weakening German positions across the continent. The question was not whether they would attack Europe, but when and how. The answer would require coordination among multiple nations and commanders. Patton, having demonstrated effectiveness under pressure, would be central to these future operations. His role in shaping armored warfare positioned him as one of the key figures in the coming advances. Beyond strategy and technology, morale played a crucial role. Troops who understood their mission and trusted their commanders operated with greater strength and confidence. Patton's forceful presence affected not only his own divisions, but also broader Allied expectations. His insistence on clarity and momentum resonated in a war defined by rapid changes. Soldiers needed leaders who appeared unshaken by uncertainty. As the Allies prepared for increasingly complex operations, Patton's ability to project confidence suited the moment. The consequences of failure extended far beyond the battlefield. Losing North Africa would compromise future operations, disrupt supply routes, and allow the Axis to strengthen positions across multiple regions. Victory, on the other hand, would open pathways into Europe and shift the balance of power. The Allies needed commanders capable of turning strategic advantages into practical outcomes. Patton's approach promised exactly that. The upcoming campaigns would test his theories, expose his strengths, and reveal how much influence one leader could exert in a global conflict. With global tensions rising, new fronts developing, and armored warfare becoming central to every major campaign, the stage was set. Patton had emerged as a leader whose focus on speed and discipline aligned with Allied objectives. The next phase of the war would require careful planning, coordinated efforts, and commanders willing to commit to large-scale operations. The storm was not merely approaching, it was forming in detail, plan by plan, decision by decision. As the Allies assessed the situation after early engagements, it became clear that planning alone would not win the war. Victory required momentum, coordination, and leaders capable of translating complex directives into instantaneous action. Patton understood this dynamic well. Before any major campaign, he immersed himself in topographic details, logistical calculations, and rapid-moving operational frameworks. The build-up to upcoming operations was not abstract. It was a careful combination of preparation and anticipation. Every decision, every movement, every adjustment reflected a larger strategic vision. Patton believed that battles were won long before the first engine roared to life. As armored warfare became central to Allied planning, the U.S. Army undertook a major restructuring. Divisions learned to operate as flexible, mobile units rather than rigid formations. Tanks needed coordinated support from infantry, artillery, engineers, and air units. Patton advocated for training that emphasized joint operations and rapid adaptation. He pushed officers to understand fuel consumption rates, maintenance cycles, and terrain advantages. His belief was straightforward. Without organization, speed was meaningless. With the right structure, however, armor could break through defenses and reshape battlefields in hours instead of days. Patton approached strategy with a blend of historical knowledge and modern urgency. He studied ancient campaigns for lessons in maneuver warfare, then applied those insights to mechanized divisions. He believed in clear objectives, rapid execution, and continuous pressure. His planning sessions often included detailed map studies, rehearsals, and direct inspections of units. Before any campaign, he sought to eliminate uncertainty. Officers needed to know the plan precisely. Soldiers needed to trust that their movements had purpose. This clarity created confidence, which, in Patton's view, was as important as firepower. The early North African battles taught the Allies that preparation mattered as much as bravery. Units that coordinated effectively outperformed even experienced Axis forces. Patton used these lessons to refine discipline, logistics, and communication. He expected units to maintain high readiness and insisted that commanders anticipate potential delays. The desert environment demanded flexibility. Sand, heat, and distance affected every calculation, from engine reliability to supply deliveries. Preparing for future operations meant adjusting to these challenges, adapting tactics, and ensuring that all units could respond instantly to new orders. As the Allies unified their strategic direction, coordination became crucial. American, British, and Commonwealth forces needed shared goals, consistent communication, and compatible operational plans. Patton worked within this structure, interacting with senior commanders and participating in joint planning. Differences in doctrine required negotiation and adaptation. British forces brought experience. American forces brought industrial capacity and growing manpower. The challenge was aligning these strengths. Patton's willingness to push for rapid movement complemented broader Allied objectives, contributing to plans that valued momentum and decisive action. One of the most important build-ups involved preparation for the invasion of Sicily. The island was strategically significant, offering a gateway into southern Europe and a chance to weaken Axis control of the Mediterranean. Planning required months of coordination across air, sea, and land forces. Patton's role would be central. His command would need to move quickly once ashore, securing ports, pushing inland, and disrupting enemy withdrawal routes. The operation demanded precision. Patton examined maps, studied coastal terrain, and anticipated German and Italian defensive strategies. Every detail mattered. Effective strategy relied on accurate intelligence. Prior to major operations, reconnaissance flights mapped terrain features, enemy positions, and potential landing zones. Ground reports offered insight into Axis supply lines and reinforcement capabilities. Patton valued intelligence highly, studying each report with care. He wanted to know enemy strengths, likely reactions, and possible gaps. These details informed his decisions, allowing him to plan movements that maximized speed while minimizing risk. For Patton, preparation was not passive. It was an active process of gathering and refining information. Behind Patton's fast-moving armored columns stood an extensive logistical network. Ammunition depots, fuel lines, repair workshops, and transport convoys formed the hidden infrastructure of every campaign. Planners calculated fuel consumption with exact precision, ensuring that tanks would not stall at decisive moments. Patton demanded that supply officers anticipate needs before units requested them. He believed that speed depended on uninterrupted support. Without logistics, even the strongest armored force would halt. With logistics, it became a dynamic instrument of strategy. Training intensified as new campaigns approached. Patton pushed units through rigorous exercises designed to simulate combat conditions. Drivers learned to maneuver tanks across uneven terrain. Artillery crews rehearsed rapid displacement. Communications teams practiced maintaining contact under pressure. The emphasis was always on speed, speed of deployment, speed of coordination, speed of decision-making. Patton believed that soldiers who trained under demanding conditions would respond confidently in real battles. Their discipline, forged in preparation, would become a decisive advantage. Technological developments influenced planning. New tank models increased firepower, while improved radios enhanced coordination. Engineers designed bridging equipment, enabling armored units to cross rivers and obstacles with greater efficiency. Air support integration improved through shared communication procedures. Patton tracked these advancements closely. He wanted his units to understand their equipment thoroughly, using strengths effectively and compensating for limitations. Modern warfare required more than courage. It demanded technical competence. Preparation ensured that every soldier knew how to leverage technology to support strategic goals. Timelines were the backbone of strategic buildup. Coordinated landings, synchronized advances, and staged reinforcement flows required exact scheduling. Patton favored plans that minimized delays and emphasized continuous pressure. He believed that once an operation began, momentum had to be maintained. Timelines served as both structure and motivation. They forced planners to anticipate complications and create flexible alternatives. In Patton's view, a well-timed advance could achieve results that raw strength alone could not. Patton understood that psychological readiness influenced performance. During the build-up to campaigns, he spoke to units, emphasizing discipline, purpose, and confidence. His speeches focused on clarity and determination, reinforcing the idea that preparation created victory. Troops trained harder, maintained equipment better, and approached missions with a sense of direction. Morale was not left to chance. It was shaped deliberately. Soldiers who believed in their mission were more resilient, more coordinated, and more responsive under pressure. Strategic deception played a role in major operations. Allied planners developed misleading signals, false troop concentrations, and deceptive radio traffic to confuse enemy intelligence. Patton understood the value of such efforts. By projecting strength or intent in one region, the Allies could divert Axis attention from actual objectives. These measures increased the chances of surprise, reducing enemy preparedness. Successful deception shortened battles and saved resources. It was a critical component of the build-up. Air support became integral to armored warfare. Patton coordinated closely with air commanders to ensure that fighter and bomber operations complemented ground movements. Reconnaissance flights refined landing plans. Fighters protected convoys. Bombers targeted enemy supply lines and defensive positions. These actions required synchronization. Communications officers developed shared procedures, ensuring that ground units could request support quickly and accurately. The build-up of this joint capability promised to transform the coming campaign into a dynamic, coordinated advance. As preparations neared completion, there was a rising sense of anticipation across Allied ranks. Equipment was loaded, troops were briefed, plans were finalized. Patton felt the momentum building. The months of training, planning, and coordination had shaped a force capable of fast, decisive movement. The storm was not theoretical. It was waiting just beyond the horizon. When the first engines roared to life and the first landing craft approached shore, the build-up would transform into action. Everything depended on execution, and soon execution would begin. The Allied assault on Sicily launched with coordinated land, sea, and air operations. As troops moved toward the island's rugged coastline, the scale of the moment became unmistakable. Landing craft thrashed through waves. Aircraft crossed the Mediterranean in layered formations. Naval guns hammered defensive positions. Patton's forces were part of a massive undertaking designed to secure the island quickly and create momentum for further operations in Europe. Every hour mattered. As engines hummed and soldiers braced for landing, the clash that would test Allied preparation had finally arrived. Patton believed that the first minutes of battle could define the entire campaign. He insisted on precise timing, coordinated landings, and fast deployment. As American forces approached the shore, he monitored reports with calm intensity, focusing on movement rather than uncertainty. The terrain offered a mix of beaches, cliffs, and inland hills, requiring flexible tactics. Once ashore, units needed to secure strong points before enemy reinforcements could reorganize. Patton emphasized immediate action. The quicker his divisions gained control, the less time defenders had to react. The first waves encountered varied resistance. In some sectors, defenders were lightly positioned and fell back under pressure. In others, fortified positions slowed Allied progress with coordinated counterfire. Patton analyzed these developments swiftly. If one route stalled, he pushed additional units through alternative paths. The goal was movement, never allowing enemy forces to settle or form stable defensive lines. Artillery support concentrated on stubborn positions, clearing paths for infantry and armor. The landing phase set the tempo, fast, deliberate, and constantly evolving. Once beachheads were secured, Patton unleashed armored elements to exploit openings. Tanks rumbled across uneven ground, bypassing obstacles and probing weak points. Infantry marched alongside, maintaining contact and securing flanks. Air support disrupted defensive gatherings, giving armored units room to maneuver. Patton coordinated these movements with precision, shaping the battlefield into a series of rapid advances. With each push, American forces gained momentum, forcing Axis units to retreat or reposition. The inland terrain demanded attention, but it also hid opportunities Patton sought to capture. The defenders reacted with localized counterattacks. German and Italian units attempted to slow the Allied advance with well-planned engagements, using knowledge of terrain to stage defensive stands. They targeted narrow passes, road junctions, and elevated positions. Patton's intelligence teams relayed updates in real time, allowing him to adjust movements. When resistance intensified, he shifted focus, applying pressure elsewhere. His approach denied Axis forces the ability to predict Allied intentions. Rather than engage in prolonged standoffs, Patton maneuvered to keep the initiative firmly in Allied hands. As the advance continued, Patton emphasized maneuver above attrition. He directed units to outflank strongpoints rather than attack directly. Mobility became the key element of each engagement. Armored columns raced along open stretches, seeking to cut off routes of withdrawal. Infantry advanced through villages and fields, maintaining consistent pace. Artillery batteries leapfrogged positions to maintain support. The result was a dynamic battlefield where Allied forces dictated tempo. Patton's doctrine of speed in execution became visible in every movement. Radio networks became essential tools of the clash. Patton's headquarters maintained constant communication with forward units, adjusting plans as conditions changed. Reports flowed between tank commanders, infantry officers, and artillery observers. Clear communication allowed synchronized actions, minimizing confusion. Patton monitored these updates, issuing concise directives. The battlefield changed hour by hour, but coordinated decision-making ensured that units advanced with cohesion. Technology amplified leadership, enabling rapid responses to developing situations. Allied air forces played a decisive role. Fighters patrolled the skies, limiting Axis reconnaissance. Bombers targeted enemy strongholds, supply depots, and communication lines. These strikes weakened resistance and created openings for ground forces. Patton coordinated closely with air units, identifying targets that aligned with his larger strategy. Air superiority reduced enemy mobility, enabling faster advances. Each successful sortie contributed to a tightening grip across Sicily's landscape. Sicily's geography shaped the clash in unexpected ways. Narrow roads restricted armored movement, forcing units to spread across multiple routes. Hills provided vantage points, but also concealed enemy defenses. Patton encouraged officers to adapt quickly, using reconnaissance to guide every advance. Engineers cleared obstacles, built makeshift bridges, and reinforced critical passages. Troops learned to navigate villages with methodical precision. Adaptation turned challenges into manageable risks. By staying flexible, Patton's forces preserved their momentum despite demanding terrain. In towns and small cities, the pace changed. Streets, buildings, and alleyways created close-quarter conditions that required coordination between infantry and armor. Tanks provided support, but infantry cleared resistance house by house. Patton understood that urban encounters demanded patience, yet he pressed commanders to maintain overall tempo. Once key intersections were secured, he redirected armored units to bypass areas of heavy resistance where possible. This approach prevented urban zones from stalling the broader campaign. As pressure increased, Axis forces sought to reorganize and establish new defensive lines. They pulled back to higher elevations and used natural barriers to delay the American advance. Patton interpreted these movements as signs of weakening control. He instructed units to strike before defenders could consolidate. Timely artillery barrages disrupted gathering forces. Mechanized infantry pressed forward, forcing continued withdrawals. Denying the enemy time to regroup became one of Patton's central tactics in this phase of the clash. Nightfall did not stop movement. Patton believed in continuous pressure, and units advanced even under limited visibility. Moonlit roads echoed with engines, while scouts moved ahead to identify safe passage. Night operations disoriented defenders, who struggled to predict Allied movements. Patton monitored reports and issued new directives as terrain features emerged in moonlight. The ability to maneuver at night added to the sense of relentless pursuit. This non-stop pace left Axis forces with fewer opportunities to reorganize. Patton targeted strategic towns, road networks, and supply hubs essential for controlling the island. Each objective represented more than territory. It was a step toward operational dominance. His divisions moved in coordinated thrusts, securing areas that disrupted enemy logistics. Progress accelerated as troops gained experience with the terrain. With every objective reached, enemy options narrowed. The campaign became a series of rapid strikes, each reinforcing Patton's belief in decisive movement. One of the most dramatic elements of the clash was the rapid advance toward Palermo. Patton recognized the city's strategic value as a port and logistical hub. He pushed his units with clear urgency, cutting across the island faster than expected. Bridges were repaired with impressive speed. Obstacles were circumvented or cleared immediately. Infantry and armor moved as a coordinated machine. The pace stunned defenders and impressed Allied observers. Within days, Palermo fell, marking a significant milestone in the clash and reinforcing Patton's effectiveness. With Palermo under Allied control, Patton shifted focus to securing surrounding areas. Units swept through villages, cleared remaining pockets of resistance, and established firm control over communication lines. This consolidation ensured that reinforcements could move freely and that supplies flowed without interruption. Patton oversaw these actions with meticulous attention. Every secured road strengthened the Allied position. The western sector stabilized quickly, creating conditions for further operations toward the island's eastern strongholds. The eastern half of Sicily contained more fortified positions, supported by difficult terrain. As American forces moved closer, they encountered stronger resistance. Axis commanders concentrated their remaining units along defensible ridges and passes. Patton analyzed these formations carefully. He coordinated with neighboring Allied forces to pressure enemy lines from multiple directions. Rather than force costly direct engagements, he sought openings through maneuver. The eastern defenses slowed progress but could not halt the broader advance. Throughout the clash, combined arms operations played a crucial role. Tanks advanced with infantry support. Artillery shaped the battlefield. Air units suppressed defensive concentrations. Patton's emphasis on coordination ensured that each branch operated with shared intent. This unity allowed Allied forces to respond effectively to shifts in enemy tactics. Even when resistance intensified, combined arms provided solutions. Each element compensated for the limitations of the others, strengthening the overall advance. As the clash progressed, Axis command recognized that holding Sicily would become increasingly difficult. Reinforcement routes faced disruption from air and naval actions. Patton's advancing divisions pressured defensive positions, denying stability. Enemy forces began withdrawing toward evacuation points, seeking to preserve manpower for future campaigns. Patton anticipated this shift. he intensified efforts to cut routes and disrupt coordination. The pressure left defenders with decreasing room to maneuver. Withdrawal became the only viable option. The last phase of the clash involved tightening control over remaining enemy positions. Allied units expanded their reach, securing roads, bridges, and passes. Patton's focus remained on maintaining momentum until all major objectives were met. Tanks advanced through final defensive lines, and infantry cleared high ground. As resistance thinned, the operational picture became clearer. Sicily would soon fall. The Allied advance had achieved its purpose, reshaping the strategic landscape and preparing the way for operations beyond the island. By the conclusion of the clash, Axis forces no longer dictated the pace of conflict. The initiative had shifted firmly to the Allies. Patton's emphasis on speed, coordination, and relentless maneuver had broken enemy cohesion. Communications records indicated increasing confusion within Axis ranks. Every successful Allied movement widened the strategic gap. The campaign highlighted the power of mobility and preparation. As the clash wrapped up, the groundwork for the decisive turning point had been set. By mid-1944, the Allied advance across France had slowed. Supply lines stretched thin, fuel shortages grew real, and German forces, though retreating, continued to counterattack with precision. It was a moment demanding clarity, boldness, and reorganization. Into this complexity stepped Patton, whose command of the newly formed Third Army prepared him for a decisive role. His units were already trained for mobile warfare, structured to strike quickly and exploit gaps before the enemy could recover. The strategic situation was delicate. Move too slowly and Germany could stabilize. Move too recklessly and Allied forces risked isolation. Patton recognized the window of opportunity and understood that mobility, discipline, and initiative would determine the outcome. Operation Cobra opened the door for a breakout, but it was Patton's Third Army that transformed opportunity into breakthrough. As soon as clearance came, Patton unleashed rapid advances through the weakened German lines. His armored divisions moved with sharp coordination, bypassing strong points and pushing deep into territory previously thought unreachable at such pace. Command posts shifted forward almost daily, ensuring Patton could monitor changes and strike faster than German commanders could react. The significance of this moment lay not only in movement, but in the psychological shift it created. German units, accustomed to slower Allied progress, now faced a force that operated with speed unfamiliar to the Western Front. What followed was an advance so swift that even Allied planners struggled to keep pace. Town after town fell, bridges were secured before they could be demolished, and German formations began losing cohesion. Patton urged his units to maintain momentum regardless of discomfort or terrain. The Third Army's flexible structure allowed armored columns to shift direction with minimal delay, turning the advance into a continuous pressure mechanism. Supply officers worked under immense strain, racing to deliver fuel and ammunition to the front. Despite these challenges, the gains were decisive. This period marked the first time German commanders openly acknowledged that the tempo of Patton's operations threatened their ability to regroup. Yet momentum alone could not determine every engagement. The Lorraine region introduced terrain, fortifications and weather that countered Patton's style. The area was dotted with rivers, marshlands, and defensive positions dating back to earlier conflicts. German forces used these features to slow any advance. Patton faced delays, criticism, and an operational environment that resisted fast movement. Still, his adaptability emerged. He reorganized approaches, coordinated artillery more closely with armored units, and emphasized reconnaissance to identify weak points. Though the campaign proved longer and more complex than expected, it demonstrated Patton's ability to adjust when speed was no longer an option. The lessons gained here would shape his response to the crisis about to unfold. In December 1944, the German winter offensive, later known as the Battle of the Bulge, created a massive challenge for the Allies. The attack struck through the Ardennes, catching multiple units off guard. Harsh weather grounded aircraft, fog concealed enemy movements, and communication lines bent under pressure. Patton was in the midst of planning further advances in the east when information about the German assault reached him. The crisis demanded immediate realignment of strategy. Allied forces in the north were under threat of encirclement, and roads through the Ardennes became critical lifelines. It was a moment where hesitation could lead to disaster, but rapid action might reverse the situation. During a high-level meeting, Patton stunned fellow commanders by announcing he could pivot his entire army north within days, something considered nearly impossible under winter conditions. But Patton had already anticipated the possibility of a German counterstroke and prepared contingency plans in advance. His staff, trained to reorganize quickly, began redirecting columns, adjusting supply routes, and recalibrating objectives. What could have been a chaotic scramble became a coordinated maneuver. This capability to redirect an entire army on short notice became one of the defining elements of Patton's leadership and a turning point in the broader campaign. With American airborne units surrounded in Bastogne, the situation carried enormous symbolic and strategic weight. Patton understood the urgency. His armored divisions pushed into snow-covered terrain, navigating icy roads and limited visibility. The weather, though debilitating, also masked movements from German observation. Patton's orders emphasized continuous advance, efficient communication, and steady pressure. Artillery support followed closely despite the challenges of frozen ground and limited supply convoys. German units attempted to block progress at key junctions, but coordination within the Third Army allowed breakthroughs at critical points. Every mile gained tightened the noose around the German offensive. When Patton's forces reached the outskirts of Bastogne, they faced entrenched German resistance. Fighting was intense, but the Third Army pressed forward with determination. Eventually, a corridor was opened, allowing reinforcement and stabilizing the defensive pocket. The symbolic value of the relief was immense, but its operational impact was even greater. The momentum of the German offensive began collapsing. Patton's rapid maneuver, pivoting an entire army, advancing through winter terrain and establishing the link with Bastogne, became one of the most praised actions of the Western Front. It represented the moment when the strategic balance shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. Once the Bastogne corridor was secured, Patton continued pressing the enemy to prevent German units from reorganizing. His approach relied on steady advances, supported by coordinated artillery and mobile infantry. The objectives during this phase emphasized containment and attrition, limiting German withdrawals, capturing key road networks, and denying the enemy the ability to mount another major offensive. Although the overall fighting across the Ardennes continued into January, the critical turning point had passed. Patton's role in stabilizing the front demonstrated not only his operational talent, but also his ability to perform under extreme conditions. The success in the Ardennes significantly altered Allied views of Patton. Previously seen by some as too aggressive or unpredictable, he was now regarded as a commander capable of decisive action in crisis. His ability to anticipate, reorganize, and strike with precision earned new respect. The public narrative surrounding Patton grew, but within military circles, the more important recognition centered on his strategic insight. The Ardennes marked the moment when his strengths aligned perfectly with the demands of the campaign, elevating his role in the final phase of the war. By early 1945, the strategic landscape of Western Europe had shifted decisively. The German winter offensive had failed, Allied supply lines stabilized, and momentum returned to the westward advance. Patton's Third Army emerged from the Ardennes, not weakened, but sharpened by the experience. The next objective was clear: cross into Germany, penetrate its defenses, and dismantle the remaining capacity of the Wehrmacht. The campaign ahead required precision, coordination, and the ability to maintain momentum despite the enemy's entrenched positions. Patton approached this phase with the same fundamental principle that had defined his earlier operations: continuous pressure. The Saar region represented a fortified industrial zone that Germany considered vital. Rivers, slopes, and reinforced positions made the area difficult to penetrate. Patton had encountered these challenges before in Lorraine, but this time he held the advantage of experience and renewed logistical support. His divisions advanced with coordinated artillery screens, while engineers worked rapidly to clear obstacles and repair roads. German resistance was organized, but increasingly unable to match the sustained tempo of the Third Army. As the Saar barrier weakened, openings formed for a deeper push into Germany, setting the stage for the most consequential crossing of the campaign. The Rhine River had long been viewed as Germany's natural defensive wall. Its width, strong currents and limited crossing points made it a formidable challenge for any invading force. Patton understood that capturing a Rhine crossing intact would save time, lives and resources. As his forces approached, reconnaissance units searched for opportunities, while artillery remained poised to suppress resistance. German units fought to delay the advance, but the cumulative impact of earlier defeats reduced their ability to form cohesive lines. Every kilometer gained brought the Third Army closer to the river that marked the gateway to central Germany. On March 22, 1945, Patton seized the opportunity to cross the Rhine near Oppenheim. Unlike other crossings that required weeks of preparation, this operation relied on speed and execution. Under the cover of darkness, infantry units moved quietly to secure the far bank, supported by artillery positioned to respond instantly to any counterattack. Engineers constructed pontoon bridges with impressive speed, enabling armored units to follow. The crossing shocked German commanders, who expected a larger build-up before such an attempt. Patton's ability to act swiftly turned this moment into one of the most praised operational achievements of the Third Army, opening the interior of Germany to Allied armor. Once across the Rhine, Patton ordered an immediate expansion of the bridgehead. His strategy emphasized dispersing German attention by advancing along multiple axes simultaneously. Armored columns rushed through small towns, securing crossroads before defenders could reorganize. Communication networks collapsed under the pressure. German units retreating toward the east found their routes cut, forcing them to surrender or scatter. The Third Army avoided prolonged engagements, preferring momentum over positional battles. This approach allowed them to cover remarkable distances in short periods, accelerating the fragmentation of German defenses. April 1945 marked some of the fastest advances the Third Army conducted during the entire war. Columns moved through wooded ridges, open plains, and urban districts with a rhythm that kept German forces off balance. Patton adjusted objectives daily, ensuring units stayed focused on corridors that offered the greatest operational impact. The capture of major transportation hubs further accelerated progress. Despite occasional pockets of resistance, the trend was unmistakable. German formations lacked the cohesion, fuel and manpower to mount a sustained counteroffensive. Each successful advance chipped away at the remaining structure of the German war machine. As Patton's forces pressed deeper into Germany, they encountered communities disrupted by years of total war, roads filled with displaced civilians, abandoned equipment, and scattered military convoys. Among the most significant discoveries were detention camps, where conditions revealed the broader human cost of the conflict. Patton emphasized maintaining order, providing immediate assistance, and documenting locations so that relief units could respond quickly. The Third Army's presence in these areas brought stability and signaled the nearing collapse of German authority. Every liberated town became part of a wider effort to restore control and security throughout the region. By late April, the Third Army advanced toward southeastern Germany and the borders of Czechoslovakia. Patton recognized that this region held significant strategic value due to its remaining industrial sites and transportation routes. German resistance stiffened as isolated units attempted to defend mountain passes and key junctions. Despite these challenges, the Third Army maintained its momentum. Coordination with air support improved as weather cleared, enabling reconnaissance flights that identified new paths of advance. Each breakthrough expanded Allied control and constrained German forces retreating further east. The city of Pilsen became a key objective due to its location and infrastructure. Patton's units moved rapidly toward it, overcoming scattered resistance and securing roads vital for the final stages of the campaign. The Third Army's advance here symbolized the broader collapse of German defensive capacity. When the city was reached and secured, it marked one of the last major achievements of Patton's wartime operations. The local population greeted the soldiers with relief and gratitude, underscoring the significance of the Third Army's arrival in the region. By early May 1945, Germany's military position was untenable. Command structures deteriorated, supply systems failed, and remaining units surrendered in increasing numbers. Patton's Third Army stood in a position of strength, holding vast swaths of territory and maintaining the ability to advance further if required. While political and strategic considerations determined final boundaries, the campaign showcased the effectiveness of Patton's leadership and the adaptability of his army. The final days reflected a moment where operational excellence, coordination, and persistence aligned, bringing the war in Europe to its concluding chapter. As the ceasefire orders circulated on May 7-8, Patton's forces halted major operations. Soldiers who had been in continuous motion for months finally paused, reflecting on the scale of their achievement. From the breakout in France to the swift advances across Germany, the Third Army had covered remarkable ground. Patton acknowledged the discipline and endurance of his troops, recognizing that their efforts contributed significantly to the Allied victory. The quiet that followed the ceasefire marked a dramatic contrast to the months of sustained pressure and movement that defined the final campaign. Patton's conduct during the European campaign offers a distinct study in operational leadership. His philosophy centered on initiative, tempo, and clarity of purpose. Historians often highlight that his decisions prioritized momentum, believing that persistent forward pressure disrupted enemy planning. This approach contrasted with more cautious operational styles, yet it consistently produced measurable advances. Analysts note that Patton's leadership functioned effectively when supported by reliable logistics and strong communication lines, demonstrating how organization and infrastructure determined the success of fast-moving operations. Strategists studying Patton's campaigns frequently point to his ability to exploit shifting battlefield conditions. His responsiveness during the Ardennes counteroffensive illustrated an understanding of terrain, timing, and concentration of force. However, experts also observed that rapid advances created vulnerabilities in supply chains and coordination. Patton's operations worked best when supported by flexible administrative systems capable of adjusting to frequent changes in direction. This balance between aggression and logistical stability remains a recurring topic in military analysis, showing that even the most dynamic strategies required structural support to succeed. Patton's wartime experiences contributed to broader discussions about the role of armored forces in modern conflict. Specialists emphasize that his campaigns demonstrated how tanks functioned most effectively when paired with integrated infantry, artillery, and engineering units. His emphasis on combined arms coordination influenced post-war doctrines across multiple countries. Analysts often reference his operations to illustrate the importance of mobility, reconnaissance, and interoperable command structures. These components shaped future mechanized strategies, highlighting how battlefield experiences informed long-term military development. In evaluating Patton's leadership, historians also examine how his expectations shaped the performance of the Third Army. His direct communication style, high standards, and emphasis on discipline created a force that responded rapidly to orders and adapted to demanding conditions. Some experts argue that his confidence contributed positively to morale during challenging phases of the war. Others note that strong personalities in leadership can introduce friction if not carefully aligned with overall strategic objectives. These observations show how leadership style influences both operational outcomes and internal dynamics. Reflecting on Patton's final drive into Germany, analysts regard it as a demonstration of logistical sophistication paired with tactical decisiveness. The rapid advances across the Rhine and into Central Europe revealed how coordinated planning could accelerate the end of a conflict. Many modern military studies consider Patton's campaigns instructive examples of how adaptability, speed, and command confidence shape outcomes on large and complex battlefields. His legacy remains intertwined with ongoing discussions about command philosophy and the application of armored forces in modern warfare. From the shores of Sicily to the heart of Germany, Patton's campaigns illustrate the impact of decisiveness, preparation, and relentless momentum. What began as calculated landings and rapid maneuvers culminated in a drive that reshaped the final months of World War II in Europe. Each river crossed, each city secured, and each resistance broken was the result of meticulous planning translated into swift action. The Third Army's achievements reflected not only the strength of the men and machines, but the vision of a commander who understood that speed, clarity, and adaptability could determine the outcome of entire campaigns. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Patton's European campaigns. If you found this story compelling, take a moment to comment your thoughts on leadership, strategy, or the moments that surprised you. Subscribe for more episodes that bring history to life. Sharing this story helps others understand the pivotal figures who shaped the course of the Second World War. In our next episode, we travel to North Africa to explore the legendary desert fox, Rommel, and his daring campaigns across the sands. Witness how innovation, tactics, and audacity transformed a theater of war, and discover what lessons his maneuvers hold for modern military strategy. Don't miss it. History is about to come alive again.